Today we're going to talk about one of the most misunderstood figures in all of medieval history, the knight. Not the fairy tale knight in shining armor riding off to save a princess. The real one. The one who lived in 13th century Western Europe, who smelled like iron and sweat, and whose life expectancy was not great. This helmet, this closed iron visor. Do you know what it was like to wear this in summer? Temperatures inside a full suit of armor could reach 50 degrees Celsius. Knights regularly passed out from heat exhaustion on the battlefield, but we'll get to that. France, England, the Holy Roman Empire, the 12th and 13th centuries. This is the peak of the feudal system. A world divided into lords, knights, peasants, and everyone owes someone something. This pyramid of obligation is called feudalism, and the knight sits right in the middle of it. Powerful enough to be dangerous, but not free enough to be truly independent. And the most important thing I want you to remember today, most knights died in obscurity. Not in heroic last stands, not in famous battles. They died poor, broken, and forgotten. Archaeology confirms this. Their skeletons tell stories that the chronicles never bothered to write down. So let's follow a specific person. We'll call him Adam, a composite based on historical records from 13th century France. Adam is 14 years old. He is a peasant's son from a small village near Burgundy. He has never owned a sword. He has never ridden a horse. He doesn't even own shoes that fit properly. And in 3 days, a mounted knight will arrive at his village and change his life completely. His father is a blacksmith. This sounds impressive. But in medieval France, blacksmiths were barely above serfs on the social ladder. Adam watches his father work every day. Heavy, back-breaking labor from dawn to dusk, for pay that barely covers their bread. This is the world Adam comes from. Not poverty as a concept. Poverty is Tuesday. His mother washes clothes by the river, every day, regardless of weather. In medieval peasant households, women worked as hard as men, but history recorded almost none of their names. Remember that. The family shares a single piece of bread at the table. Historians estimate that many French peasants in the 13th century consumed fewer than 1,500 calories per day, well below what a working adult needs. Chronic malnutrition was standard. This is the body Adam brings into knighthood training, already weakened before it even begins. A knight arrives at the village. He needs a page, essentially a servant boy attached to the castle. Adam is chosen. Why Adam specifically? Often it was random. Or the knight knew the family, or Adam simply looked strong enough to be useful. He is taken from his family immediately. No goodbye ceremony. That's not how 13th century feudalism worked. As a page, Adam scrubs boots, cleans floors, runs errands. He is at the bottom of the castle hierarchy, below squires, below knights, below even most servants in terms of respect. Water duty. Every morning, before the knights wake up, pages carried heavy buckets up stone staircases to fill wash basins and kitchen reserves. Medieval castles had no running water. Every drop had to be carried by hand. Historians have found evidence of severe joint damage in the skeletons of young males from castle sites, almost certainly from repetitive heavy lifting beginning in early adolescence. Warhorses, called destriers, were enormously valuable animals, more valuable in many cases than the knights who rode them. A single destrier could cost the equivalent of a knight's annual income. Adam's job was to feed them, groom them, and keep them healthy. If a horse died in his care, the consequences were severe. These hands. This detail right here is one of the most honest images in this entire story. Cracked, bleeding hands. This is what knighthood begins with. Not with a sword, not with a horse. With bleeding hands on a cold stone floor at age 14. Remember this image when someone tells you knights were born into privilege. Several years pass. Adam becomes a squire, the second stage of knighthood training. Now the physical demands escalate dramatically. Dawn runs in full or partial armor, obstacle courses, swimming in chainmail. Yes, this was a real training exercise. The logic was, if you can swim in chainmail, you can survive a river crossing in battle. A full suit of plate armor, developed through the 13th and 14th centuries, weighed between 15 and 25 kilograms. As a squire, Adam's primary job was to maintain this armor, polish it to prevent rust, repair damage, and most importantly, dress his knight before battle. This had to be done quickly and perfectly. Incorrectly fastened armor could get a knight killed. Combat training with wooden swords, called wasters. Don't underestimate these. Oak wasters could break wrists, crack ribs, knock out teeth. Training was not gentle. The philosophy of medieval martial education was simple. Hurt them now so the enemy hurts them less later. Squires trained together, competed against each other, and the weaker ones washed out. Collapse. Get up. This wasn't motivational theater. This was a genuine selection process. Only roughly 1 in 3 pages who entered training actually completed it and became squires. And of squires, only about half ultimately received knighthood. The medieval system was brutal, but it produced fighters who could function under extraordinary physical stress. This is medically documented. Studies of medieval skeletal remains from England and France consistently show that men identified as warriors, by weapon injuries and muscle attachment patterns on their bones, had severe spinal compression fractures and degenerative joint disease by their late 30s. By medieval standards, 40 years old was an elderly knight. The squire carried his knight's armor across the battlefield. This is not metaphorical. This was the literal job. After a battle, squires entered the field to retrieve their knight's equipment, tend to his wounds, and if necessary, ransom him from captivity. Squires died on battlefields constantly. They receive almost no mention in medieval chronicles. The Vigil of Arms. The night before knighting, the candidate spent the entire night alone in a church or cathedral. No food, no water, no sleep. Just prayer and silence from dusk to dawn. This was called the Veil des Armes in French. The theological reasoning was purification. You were dying as a common man and being reborn as a knight of God. The practical effect was that every knight was knighted in a state of complete physical exhaustion. Fainting was common. Medieval church records from France and England document cases of candidates collapsing during the vigil. Sometimes from illness, sometimes from pure exhaustion, sometimes from the cold of the stone floor in winter. It was not considered shameful. It was considered proof that you had endured. The ceremony itself, the accolade, was brief. A lord or senior knight touched the candidate's shoulders with a sword blade and pronounced the words. In French, Je te fais chevalier. I make you a knight. 7 years as a page, 5 years as a squire, 12 years total, minimum. And it ends in about 30 seconds of ceremony. Adam stands up. He is now Sir Adam. He has a title. He has a rank. What he does not have: money, land, a horse of his own, armor of his own. Many newly knighted men in the 13th century were, by modern standards, completely broke. The title was real. The wealth that supposedly came with it often was not. He looks at his reflection in his helmet. This is the moment historians find most compelling when they read the personal accounts and letters that survive from medieval knights. Almost universally, there is a gap between what they expected and what they found. Glory was the promise. The reality was debt, obligation, and the constant fear of failing your lord. And please subscribe to the channel, give it a like, let me know what you think of the video, and share your ideas. Have a great day.